Good morning. It is time to discuss the native Spanish media that I have been consuming. So in this series, I talk about things that were natively produced in Spanish, so like not translations, not dubbed things, etc. So we will start with books. The first one is Elena Sabe. I forgot that I do own this book. This is a relatively short book that tells the story of an elderly woman whose daughter died, and she thinks that her daughter was murdered. All of the other kind of circumstantial evidence points to that she chose to end her own life, and so she is trying to go on this journey to prove that her daughter was murdered, and a lot of other stuff happens. Based on that description, it sounds like, that this would be maybe a little bit thrillery or something like that, and it's really not. It is a very thought-provoking story that ends up talking about a lot of topics that you wouldn't expect it to based on the summary. The main character has an aggressive form of Parkinson's disease, and so there is a lot of discussion of kind of disability and the impact of that on your daily life, on the people around you. I did really, really like this book. It's not like my favorite book of all time, but it was really, really thought-provoking and engrossing, and I do recommend it. I have read this book before, but I re-listened to El Túnel by Ernesto Sabato. I had listened to this before on my own, but then we did it for the Spanish book club in the mini immersion Discord, and so I listened to it again with them. And this is a kind of existential, I would consider it like an existential horror book. I don't think that's how it's actually classified, but it's very philosophical. The story is that a murderer is telling you the story of how he met and got to know and eventually murdered his, then a girlfriend, lover, whatever. Obviously very, very dark themes. I find this book so disturbing to listen to, but at the same time it is fascinating because it really does feel so accurate to how someone in this like obsessive, twisted, dark tunnel mindset would think. And so in that way, it's very fascinating. Obviously, this is not a book everybody's going to be interested in reading for very understandable reasons, but if you are interested, I do definitely recommend it. Another short one is Voyager. This is a book by Nona Fernandez that we read in my Patreon book club. This is, like most of Nona Fernandez's works, a kind of creative nonfiction. She kind of intertwines memoir and a nonfiction topic, in this case, space and the Voyager probe expeditions or whatever. This one I didn't feel like worked quite as well as some of her other works. So this is talking about some of the disappearances that occurred during the Chilean dictatorship, which is what kind of most of her books center around, but also talking about taking care of her mother, who is kind of losing some health things, like she loses some moments in time, and so she's kind of talking about these holes in your memory. It was a really, really interesting, thought-provoking book, but I wasn't quite as captured by it, like I said, as some of her other works, so I still am glad that I read it, and I want to continue to read all of her books. My favorite of her books does continue to be The Twilight Zone, though. I listened to 2 books by Jaime Alfonso Sandoval, which is the author of Mexicoland, which was a book that I read I think I talked about it in the last Spanish Media Diaries, that I absolutely loved, not without a few comments, but I'm trying to read all of his books now. And so first I listened to La Ciudad de las Esfinges, and this is a book kind of at its core about animal rights, animal treatment, hunting, that sort of thing. So our main characters are a butler, personal servant kind of character, and two young siblings who are like exotic animal hunters. This is in kind of a magical realism or fantasy world, a little bit old-timey, but they are invited to this competition finding the most rare creature or something like that, and they will inherit like a vast fortune if they do that. And so then you are following them attempt to do that. And this was really, really interesting book. In general, I do think that my recurring theme with this author is that he's very, very creative, very good at coming up with creative story ideas and having really, really solid concepts behind them. Occasionally, the actual storytelling can get a little bit odd, just like rambly, I guess you could say. But overall, I really, really liked this book and I would recommend it. The next one, El Club de la Salamandra, these aren't connected at all. And this one I think is his first book, and I did not like this one. So this one is very, very Jules Verne-esque, like they are traveling to the bottom of the ocean and then they're in this other world at the bottom of the ocean. So this kid discovers this group of people called, I think, the anti-scientists, and they, are kind of going against, obviously, the science establishment, investigating other things, blah, blah, blah. They have all these odd beliefs, like the Earth is an egg, and so, there's some interesting stuff in there, but overall, the main character was, like, a little bit of an incel kind of guy, and I couldn't tell if he was trying to critique that or just wanted to do that. And granted, this again was written in like the 90s, so I think that was extremely typical for young male main characters at the time, and still to some extent continues to be that way. So I'm sure it was unintentional and that he didn't see anything wrong with it at the time. And then I felt like this book really didn't have a good point, and then the use of like crazy people and like asylums and stuff like that, I felt like really, again, very normalized in the 90s and still to this day, but not something I agree with. So ultimately, I really didn't like this book at all, and I don't recommend it. Then again, for the Patreon book club, I did reread Ana Cadabra #1, which is called El Club de la Luna Llena. And this is a children's book that's illustrated super, super cute. I had listened to it before, but this time I listened to it and read it at the same time, which is a more fun experience. The audiobook is really good, but this is, it does have illustrations and everything, and so it's fun to see like the color and the cute things. This is the story of a young girl who has to move to this new town called Moonville, I think, and she doesn't want to at all, but then once she gets there, she discovers that she was brought there for a particular little witchy purpose. And yeah, super cute concept. I thought the pacing and the story of this was really, really well done, which for a children's book is relatively unusual. I feel like this is not actually that easy to read. That's kind of what all of us in the group were finding. Like, obviously it's relatively easy to read because it is aimed at children, but there's a lot of informal language there, and then there's a lot of like fantasy language as well, obviously. Then I had also read Malvarina, Quiero Ser Bruja, which is the first in another similar fantasy children's book series. This one was not nearly as successful for me. I love the illustrations. This one is so cute. Like, the aesthetic of this book is wonderful. The actual story, there basically is no story. It kind of did at the very end bring up a little bit more of, the whole time I was just like, is anything gonna happen in this book? Cute pictures with silly little anecdotes to go with them, and I didn't really care about anything. So this one is included on Kindle Unlimited and Kobo Plus, so if you have either of those already, you could check this out, but I certainly wouldn't seek it out necessarily. Then finally, I listened to the book La Cría by, I think, Pablo Rivera. This was such an interesting book. So ever since I saw the cover of this book, basically I have had it on my wish list on Kobo, and so I finally used an audiobook credit to get it. So the premise of this is that the most famous little boy in Spain has gone missing. So influencer mom person has a like 3-year-old boy who is the kind of advertising figure for this type of candy. You're following the police detective who is investigating this, along with the mother, going back and forth in perspective and back and forth in time to see how they got into this like influencer world, how all these different things happened the actual day that the little boy went missing, all this stuff. This did have a lot of twists and turns, most of which happened very, very late in the book, but some of them you can kind of see unfolding throughout the book. There were a lot of things about this that I really didn't like because, the main theme of the book is the dangers of putting your children on social media publicly, especially for profit, as an influencer, that kind of thing, which is a theme that I completely agree with 100%. But it was very, very preachy and very borderline, I would almost say misogynist in the way that he framed this. It also doesn't help that I was looking at some of his other books and he seems to almost exclusively write about bad moms, and I find it so weird when men like make their whole careers writing about either stupid women like Riley Sager or bad. Yeah, I don't know. It was just weird. So there is more to it than that. Obviously, that would be a relatively boring concept. So a lot of other things do happen, and I actually really liked the way that he incorporated some other things into the story, but it took a lot to get there, I guess you could say. So yeah, overall, I guess I would say I'm glad I read it. I'm interested to read more from the author potentially, but I'm not obsessed with the book necessarily. It was just a really interesting read. Then shows and movies, I only watched one of each. For shows, I watched Oscuro, Deseo on Netflix. This is a very, very bad show. I started this while I was sick and then kind of pushed myself to finish it because there's not that much story for how long the season is. So I only watched the first season of this, and I don't know. I kind of watched like the first episode of the second season, I think, and I don't think I will continue because it just felt like more of the same. This is telling the story. Oh God, I can't even remember what this is about at this point. But, so this woman's best friend dies, and they aren't 100% sure what happened, but it seems like they know what happened. And this woman had gone home with this guy that was not her husband. And so then all this drama unfolds where this guy pops back up in her life and is trying to continue to have a relationship with her. There's all kinds of stuff going on with her husband, who may or may not be also cheating on her, and with trying to figure out what happened to this best friend. So that's like a fair amount going on, but at the same time, that's all that goes on for the whole time. Like, there's basically no building of plot or anything. It's just back and forth and back and forth between these three kind of plot lines. There are other characters, there are, some slightly more interesting things, but this is a show that I feel like I only really would have enjoyed maybe if I had watched the whole thing in one like long stuck in bed with a mild bug or something like that, but I didn't. So I just mostly, it was like every episode, like, again, why are the exact same things happening every single time? So yeah, I would say it's a safe skip. Then movies, I watched Secaderos, which is a Spanish movie from the region of Granada in Andalusia. And this was a really, really, really endearing movie. Another one of the kind of like artistic, no plot, just vibes movies where we are following a family, kind of two families who are in the tobacco growing business, struggling financially, and the daughter of one of them is kind of the main character, if there is a main character, and she is kind of torn between the family life and, like, you can tell that she really values her family and her little sibling and everything, but also, really wanting to leave this place and have more opportunities in life. And so yeah, it was a really sweet movie, really beautiful. Then podcasts. I listened to El Crash de WeWork, which is a short series by Wondery about the crash of WeWork. So what happened to this company that was like at one point valued at like, I don't know, billions and trillions of dollars or something like that, and then pretty much just like disintegrated in a very short time. It's not really a topic necessarily that interests me too much, but I do kind of appreciate, almost like a scam type story, which will come up again. But this was kind of like, it was almost like learning about like an MLM or something like that, even though it wasn't that. Then I've also been listening to Malinfluencia, also by Wondery, which is a continuing, it's not like a mini series or anything like that. It's an ongoing podcast about bad influencers or like people, con artists, stuff like that, like people who are really charismatic and influence people into and out of their money. And so this one has been really interesting to listen to. The hosts are from Mexico, I believe, and they are quite informal. It has been really good to listen to because there's quite a lot of slang, quite a lot of very rapid, kind of more difficult to understand speech is what I'm trying to get at. And also, though, bear in mind that this is a little bit more irreverent than maybe some of the podcasts, most of the podcasts that I listen to. I don't want to say they're saying anything offensive, but yeah, just a little bit more irreverent for sure. This has been interesting. I've listened to probably, 8 or so episodes, and it's been a good one to pick up when I'm not ready to commit to a new audiobook, but I still want to listen to something. Then we will just do a couple YouTube channels really quickly. So I forget how she says her name, but Judit Guell is a tech review channel, basically. So like personal tech and gadgets like iPads, e-readers, iPhones, that kind of stuff. And I really enjoy her production quality is really, really good. Her videos are beautiful. Then voyager is another booktube channel, fairly small still, so definitely check her out and support her. I really enjoy her reading vlogs a lot, and reviews and all that as well. And then Balu is I don't know what you would classify her channel as, I guess just like entertainment and media, and she does a lot of videos about different pop culture, like anime, movies, books, that sort of thing, like a fair amount of like, I read this fan fiction so you don't have to, or I watched this trashy TV show or whatever so you don't have to. So a lot of those kind of summary type videos, and I really, really enjoy her videos. Again, amazing production value, like the editing and style is incredible. That is everything that I have for you today. Let me know if you have been reading or watching or listening to anything interesting, and I will see you in the next video.